Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand up comic and host of the Rush Hour podcast. We have a very interesting update to get to revolving around the New York Times smear campaign that existed as a coordinated effort with Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds versus Justin Baldoni. This case has been absolutely wild to cover, but it's actually uncovering possibly more sinister motivations. And today we're so lucky to be joined by a returning guest. She's a content creator, influencer, and she has sued the New York Times, amongst other credits. It's Ari Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
It's so great to chat. I feel like we've caught up because I saw your Twitter thread online. You've been following this from the beginning, kind of like a whistleblower, and I guess things you were warning about are actually going on. Can you explain how, when this New York Times story dropped smearing Justin Baldoni, did you immediately have your red flag up?
Yes. Well, whenever I see a pylon, it always like my spidey senses turn on and it's like, okay, just because there's a pylon doesn't mean it's not true. But and then when I heard it was the New York Times, I'm like, okay, let me read this and let me figure out what based off of my unfortunate experience I know about them and how Hollywood operates. So I'll just kind of, give your audience a quick rundown if they don't know me. So I'm Ari Jacob, and a few years ago, I was living the dream. I built a thriving business in the influencer marketing world. I represented Charlie D'Amelio, who ended up going on to be like one of the biggest TikTok stars in the world. And I managed some of those big names. And then they wanted to do these content houses, which you could look at as a production. So kind of like a movie or a TV show. These houses were kind of reshaping the industry. But in 2020, the New York Times decided to rewrite my story, and basically one article tore it all down, and it tore down my business, my reputation, and everything. Now that I see happening to Justin Baldoni, it's like I know exactly what's going on. So the New York Times, I want people to understand, doesn't just report stories. They build narratives. And when they decide that you're the villain, they really don't care about the facts. They care about the clicks. And I've lived it. Justin Baldoni is living it. And I'm here because I want to expose this playbook that they use to take people like us down. And Baldoni is very lucky that he apparently has a billionaire backer who's willing to put everything towards defending him and the company that they built. But for the little guys like me, it's like going up against David versus Goliath.
So you're so funny because you're the second person I've spoken to today that has called them David versus Goliath. Because when you work in the industry, you understand the amount of bandwidth that exists around Ryan Reynolds as a real top of the A-list movie star. It's The Rock, it's Ryan Reynolds. There's a handful of them, and anybody in the industry that's working with them and making money off them is going to want to keep them happy, and that's
Yes.
just the world we live in. So you sued the New York Times and what in Taylor Lorenz, who again has
Right.
kind of been disgracefully, I think, fired from Washington Post and other
Yeah.
places.
And I think
Um,
after I sued the New York Times, she kind of get went away. So I don't know if that was the New York Times being like, "Hey, you almost got us in big trouble here." Because by the way, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, people, but from what I found from New York Times' own reporting, they have not lost a defamation case since 1964, since there was a ruling that basically um, covered them from really any type of repercussions when they write these sort of smear campaigns
which
against people.
it's good. It's good if you're a news organization to be protected with your freedom of speech, as long as you're upholding your end of the bargain, which is trying to get the story right. So you see the Justin Baldoni stuff happening, and like most people, rather than grab the pitchfork, or maybe not like most, but like someone who's interested in the truth, you say, "All right, I need more information." So what was it that you were starting to share tweets that were really taking off? What were you noticing that was a parallel between what you went through, and were you able to expose that quickly, or walk me through that?
Yeah, so when I first saw it, I noticed there was like specific language. So you could say someone feels uncomfortable. I think that they corroborated Lively's complaint or the story about what Blake Lively is saying by saying, yes, another person also felt uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is like a very broad word that like I could be uncomfortable right now because if I'm uncomfortable talking to public, right? I mean, it's like you could say that in so many different contexts, but when they use words like that, it's very specific. They want to guide the story a certain way. So, for example, this is like the safest way to smear someone is by using like anonymous sources. So both Justin and I were targeted with stories built around anonymous sources. It's like the oldest trick in the book. They can say whatever they want without being really held accountable. And in my case, these were influencers who didn't want to honor their contracts. And in Justin's case, it seems like it was people who might have had personal grudges or power struggles on set. And so either way, there was some like anonymity as a shield. And the media hides behind that to destroy someone's reputation. So these are like anonymous bullies. And the hardest thing about it is you don't know who's hitting you, like
Mm,
but you can feel the punch very strongly. I would say that uh, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, but the other people on set spoke out against Justin Baldoni. They agree that he's a harasser or that he's this person." But if you actually look at what the people were, I think the smaller actor in the film, the love interest too with Lily Bloom, like he posted the uh, New York Times story or the complaint, but he didn't say, yes, I saw that happen and I'm glad they spoke up. Or you didn't see another actress say, I experienced the same thing and I'm glad she spoke up for me. Like all you heard was, I stand with Blake Lively. You get what I'm saying? So it's very
sure.
different
Yeah,
than,
and in this case, you would expect, like we've seen in other, there, because sometimes, in I say most of the time, the Me Too sort of movement gets it right. If someone's exposing a like this music video director, next you know, 17 people are like, same story happened to me. The guy's a creep. I mean, I got to protect myself. I've been sued too many times
right,
these days.
right.
So I'm not gonna say any names, but it's like when someone's down, on the ropes, like Justin Baldoni is, anyone else might feel empowered to share their story both publicly or even, and they don't even have any other stories even as anonymous stories about him. So
Yeah,
yeah, like the effort and the chance to really sort of hammer down that smear kind of falls flat because you look into it, like you said, and there isn't too much there. And like you said, when it comes to
yeah,
uncomfortable, it's an uncomfortable movie. So
right.
when they're on
Yeah.
camera doing their dance and they're pulling away, and it's like, yeah, it's an uncomfortable. It's what it's supposed to
Well,
be.
and people are, I think I really liked your take on the Candace Owens thing. I think there's enough in this story. Go back and read the New York Times story, you guys. Like, don't let them get away with this. Go back and read the New York Times story now that you know the things that were twisted and point those things out that they put in the story. Not just the fact that they wrote the story, but what were the things in there that they twisted. Like one thing that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, for example, is the fact that um, they claimed in the story, I believe, I remember it was the story or the complaint or both, but that she had a thin piece of fabric covering her hoo ha, and so when you read Baldoni's complaint, they say, and I think I pointed this out too in one of my threads, is that okay, you could be wearing biker shorts and you could say, I'm wearing a thin piece of fabric covering that. But if you knew they were biker shorts, that's very different than if you thought it was like, a little tiny piece of fabric that was like taped on or something, right? Those are two very different things. But the media can say, because it's not necessarily a lie, that it's only a thin piece of fabric that's in between you and the world, right?
Right.
So, and in Baldoni's complaint, towards Lively, they say that actually she was wearing briefs. So that would imply like underwear or a bathing suit, type of bottoms, and then a hospital gown over her. So that to me sounds very different than a thin piece of fabric. The way that they specifically worded it in Lively's side. That's when I was like, listen, they're doing this very specifically to make him sound like a terrible human being.
Sure, sure. And look, I get the thin piece of fabric. It's almost there in case they have a side shot where they want to show full leg and not have a string. Like there's a million scenarios. Obviously, you need to work those out beforehand, and we haven't seen really evidence for or against that. But
But they're saying
yeah,
she was wearing underwear. That she like so Baldoni said she's wearing underwear, and I think, like, they said, like, a pregnancy thing that's like a fake belly. So
a
that's
robe too, yeah.
yeah,
And we're gonna and that's all the type of stuff that'll probably come out with in on
right.
video. And then the other thing where she was, saying he was showing me the pornography. That to me was the moment where it's like, look, we got to be fair here. We have to be fair. Was he showing you pornography? And if you're gonna characterize I think it was the producer's wife's home birth. Like we just had a baby 8 months ago. We watched dozens of home births. We watched videos with our, breathing specialist, whatever the hell, all these different people, and they're beautiful and they're emotional, and you're crying and you're goosebumps. I mean, they're anything but pornography. And it's
Right.
absolutely wild to try to, and not to mention, it's not a movie about the baseball. It's a movie about is a scene where you're giving birth. So if you want to say, hey, this is the board, the like the style board of what we're going to have you look like, and this is the emotional board of what we want you to feel, and we want you to feel this. Capture that moment.
Yep.
Completely makes her lose all credibility. To be honest.
Exactly. You said it before too in a video. What is it, like the Latin phrase, like lie
Oh,
once?
falsus in uno, falseness in omnibus. Yeah, lie once,
Yes.
lie all.
And it's like, listen, we've all probably told a fib or, but it's very different in a situation where you know that what you're doing is going to destroy someone's life, and I think anybody in Hollywood knows that a Me Too allegation is going to destroy someone's entire world. So it better be more than just, hey, they rubbed me the wrong way and I didn't like them. It better be true. That's my own personal moral standing on it. And here's the other thing that the media does. They twist things, or they take one part of the truth and leave out the rest to make you look bad. So in my case, they claim that I leaked someone's nude photos for revenge so that they wouldn't leave so that they wouldn't leave my management company. The full story, I was investigating explicit photos being sent to allegedly a minor trying to protect someone, but they left that out. And so with Justin, they highlighted claims without asking Blake Lively's, for example, trainer about the whole thing about asking her trainer about the weight. We don't know what the motivation was. We don't know what prompted that. Was it that, did Lively start talking to people and saying, I feel like he's misogynistic. Has he ever said anything misogynistic to you? And then the trainer might say, well, let me think. Actually, yeah, knowing that him giving information is going to land him in a positive light with Lively and Reynolds. Like, is he going to get more work? Like, the problem with the anonymous sources and the not getting the whole context is that you don't know if the person that's speaking anonymously is also getting something out of what they're saying. Does that make sense?
I totally agree. It could be that or like a useful idiot where like people don't even know
Yes.
that they're getting in the middle of something. But yeah, I mean, the entertainment industry, it is a dogfight to try to get work. And you might have I mean, if you're not one of the top 3, 4 actors in a movie, the rest of those roles, you're good luck getting them, And for people that could possibly be promised like a long list of opportunities in the future, hey, you might, I mean, it sounds conspiratorial, but this would be the one industry where I would believe that there's enough demand and people going after those jobs that you really can't trust. And I've seen this firsthand, any loyalty whatsoever. So I want to ask you about the sort of contract theory that you have, which is really interesting because there's been a lot of questions about why would Blake even go here if she's fabricating or her claims are very exaggerated. And you brought up before we went live some sort of like maybe a morality clause.
Right. So from what I understand and like what you've seen a lot in Hollywood, people can look it up. But basically, after the Me Too movement, the studios were like very careful now. Like they didn't want to have to pay out these huge contracts if they needed to fire somebody, right? Like if somebody
Got
um,
canceled
got
and
canceled,
they had all
right?
this
They did
money into something. Yeah.
Exactly. And so they started using these what's like a morality clause. I think Billy Bush talked about it recently too on Tucker Carlson. And basically, it's like if they decide that you breach the morality clause, then they can take it away from you. And so I started diving in, like, has this ever happened? When somebody wanted to gain the rights of something, like could Baldoni have lost the rights? And so that's when I stumbled upon the case of Roseanne Barr, who she wrote, starred in, and I don't know if she directed it, but I know that the Roseanne show was hers and they were doing a reboot of it. And then she kind of, I think, was tweeting while on some,
Yeah, like,
meds.
look,
I don't
I
know.
think Roseanne's crazy, but I don't think she's got bad intentions, and I agree. She
Right.
was tweeting on Ambien, says and again, I think she's got legitimate mental health issues because I think her brain's a little fried, but there's a lot of people in Hollywood that way. And yeah,
Yeah.
they literally wipe her from the show. I think she dies on, they not her, but the character dies, and they call it the O'Connors, or right? She's gone. They canceled
Right.
it.
So then they were able, from what I understand, they were able to do that from this morality clause. She breached the morality clause, so they were able to take the thing. So here's what I'm looking at. Okay, you're looking at people who clearly wanted to take over the project. Then there's all these other actors and people involved that are like going on her side. So in like I'm thinking that was everybody trying to kind of see where things were going and they wanted to end up on the right side of it. Like that's why it's interesting too, because even I think in my original Twitter thread, I was like, are they even planning to really sue, or did they just file the complaint and leak it in order to basically cancel Baldoni, and so that maybe he wouldn't lose the rights to it, but maybe they could do like a Taylor's version, like a Blake's version, and like change the name of the sequel and change some parts of it, but then essentially take the story away from him. Not only were they naming Baldoni, but they were naming Heath, the other partner, and Wayfair, and the billionaire backer. Like in the complaint, they kind of sprinkled them in to make it seem like basically the whole thing was rotten if Wayfair had anything to do with it. And so, in my view, that was a way to take it away. So, like,
What a
and
great theory.
yeah.
Yeah, nuke Wayfair, so you drop their value so much that maybe they could even offer Wayfair 10 million for it, or something that's like, pittance, because I think the movie made 200 million dollars on a 12 million dollar budget. So like there was
Hmm.
clearly like a lot of people go, "Oh, the movie stunk." It made a lot of money. Like it's worth a lot of money. So the
Yeah.
sequel obviously doesn't exist, or it wouldn't have. I mean, and now when we look at it in hindsight, I think Blake's kind of tarnished, unless some information comes out that kind of vindicates her. But as of right now, it's like I don't think she's going to be going, into any sequels
Yeah.
with this project.
And
But
it
that's
and
such
that's
an
that's literally what happened to me. Like, so I had these influencers that I was representing, and my view is that they were tired of like me being the mom, right? Like I'd show up to the house and I'd be like, you guys, you can't have people over that don't sign the liability waiver. You can't have people over that are under 18. You can't be jumping off the roof to go to into the pool. Like you can't be doing these things. And they
what
didn't
a
like the
nightmare.
fact. Yeah, it was. I mean, that I will take accountability for that. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten into business with these people, but hindsight is 2020. But I will say that they started to look at me as not this person that helped them get the lease to this place and basically pursue their dreams. They looked at me as, oh, now she's taking our money, now we have to give her a percentage of what we make, now she's coming in and doing all these rules. And there was another I guess like source that came in anonymously. I forget who she spoke to. I saw like the text. People can look it up on my Twitter, but essentially people were saying, or somebody on set was saying, yeah, well, people didn't like the fact that Baldoni was the director and an actor, and it was like really hard to work with him because it almost seemed like they're saying we don't like the fact that he owned it, he was in charge, and he was an actor, so he could act however he wanted, but we had to follow his lead. It's like, I'm sorry, but it's his products. It's his, that's what you signed up for. And so that seems very similar to me too, of like, okay, people didn't like Baldoni. So when then Blake starts saying these things, it's like, okay, well, I don't want him a part of it anyway. And so that's when you maybe get anonymous sources that have a benefit to take. Does that make sense? Like there's a benefit to take
Yeah,
him
and
down.
I think what's tough too, and and again, we're just kind of filling in the gaps until we figure this all out, is when you're a director, you're kind of like the dad who tries to be the friend, but you still need to be the dad. So in scenes, Blake's like trying to be like, what if we do this? And he's like, like he had, like, it's his vision and that's what he was hired to be a part of. And you can take as much advice from people, but gosh, you saw so many instances where Justin seemed to be trying to play peacekeeper. I was actually working on Will and Grace, just doing background work, and Deborah Messing and the other lead, I can't remember her name, something Megan Mullany, whatever her name is. They
Mhm.
got into an explosive fight. I mean,
Oh,
an
wow.
explosive. And
Wow.
the assistant director or the showrunner, whoever it was like, "Lady, we're not doing this. Like they literally had no time in the budget. They were like, we are not doing this right now." And they had to kind of like grit their teeth and kind of get through the scene. And you're like, holy shit!
Yeah,
When you see how this
100%
plays out, it's like
practical.
everyone who's working in entertainment gets to this level where you want to be respected for like more than what you are. Blake doesn't want to be someone who just says words and looks pretty, and yet that's kind of what you start out as when that's what you were cast as. So it almost seems to me like she wanted the respect of the writers and the directors, but that's just, it's like, look, then you got to write a movie then, because
Yeah.
you're not that. Like Justin didn't write the movie, but he found it, he got the deal, and it's his dog. And she's definitely someone with a higher pedigree. She's got a more, a bigger portfolio, and especially Ryan Reynolds does. So it's almost like if I
Yeah.
did a student film, I'd be like, oh boy, here we go. But it's like that's what you signed up for.
Well, and also people should also realize that once they came in with that list of requests, like how could Baldoni do his job? He at that point, in my opinion, and from what I experienced, it's like I wouldn't doubt it if they already had a deal with New York Times that New York Times was going to cover the story, because um like there was a plan. There had to have been a plan, right? And once they started saying like, "Hey, no more being sarcastic on set" or something like that, like my heart goes out to him because it's like, how can you even be creative at that point? You're just completely walking on eggshells. I cannot upset these people because they're going to turn me into a villain. And I think from that point on, Baldoni, Wayfair, they just did whatever in order to please her. But then it all came crashing down anyway. And I think that's the real cruel part about this. And sadly, I don't think we maybe will find out if when the New York Times became involved and all that, because what people need to understand is that even when you file a defamation suit, especially against a media company, there are journalistic protections. So even with my discovery, like when I finally got discovery 4 years after this whole thing happened for me, 4 years later, I got discovery, and some of the pieces, like the attorney said, like you can't look at them. I only the attorneys can look at them. This isn't public. Like I can't just like put the discovery out for everybody to read from the New York Times side because they have protections because they're journalists, and that's what's really scary. And I think that I hope that people support people like you because that's the only way we're going to start to find out the real, true things about what happened because the media is so massively protected. You're not going to find many judges that that basically come down on the First Amendment. Does that make sense?
Totally. And, in a case like this, public perception is almost as important as the legal perception because, even if some things are inadmissible or taken out of court, it's like you're still like the public will know what the files are, what the text messages are, the videos are. And even if New York Times didn't break a law, what we proved yesterday was that they were in cahoots with Blake Lively. They had the
Of
photos of
course.
Justin Baldoni were saved 7 days before the article came out. So, like, you just see how shoddy this is, and,
Yeah.
that's just the way it is, I guess. What do you think will happen? Do you think New York Times will settle? Do you think like, what do you
Yeah.
think? Because
No.
they're
So
suing for $250 million defamation.
the New York Times is they are they're known for not settling. Like even in my situation, like it's hard to even get past the motion to dismiss. So people need to understand just to get your case seen by the judge, like in front of a jury and get all the discovery, you basically have to prove your case before it starts. And
Right, the
it's
judge
really
has to decide, are we gonna take this case or not? And if it's something as simple as First Amendment rights, boom, it's gone.
Opinion, gone. Um, false but not defamatory, gone. False, but they didn't know it was, they didn't have any proof to or the otherwise, gone. I mean, I remember them like taking things off of my case. There's probably 50 things in there that were objectively like, they got this wrong and essentially, and I understand it wasn't, I don't think the judge got it wrong necessarily, but people just have to understand that the New York Times has no, they don't have to write the other side of the story. They just have to not post anything. They have to not write anything that they know is false and defamatory from the like outset. It's very hard. You
Right,
guys,
no,
I'm
and
sure there's a ton of yeah,
it's almost like it's an ignorance by them to not give enough
yes,
time to Justin Baldoni's camp. I think they were gonna give him 12 hours, they ended up giving him 10 or something like that, which is absurd to go through 180 pages. It takes 6 hours to read it out loud, let
yep.
alone
They did the same
respond,
to me. Yeah,
and it's
6
like
hours. You don't know what they have. You can't, you can't track, the other thing is, like, you can't breach your contract, so if Baldoni had a contract, let's say, with, Lively for, like, not showing her text messages or, like, a mutual NDA, then if he puts out her stuff, then he could be sued, so it's just a legal hot mess. What do I think? I think people this is one that I haven't like spoken out about that I think people need to research is who was Justin Baldoni's agent at WME? Like, what is the name of the person that represented Justin? And does that person still work at WME or are they gone? The reason I would look into that is because, and in my situation, same thing, these agents operate in the shadows, but they are talking to everybody. They know everything that's going on. So, one of my other little hunches is, there was, I think, the Lively's thing, and in the New York Times, it said that that somebody had heard Steve Sarowitz, the billionaire, say, "I'm going to spend $100 million to destroy Blake Lively," whatever. If he did say that, I have a feeling that there was probably a talent agent from WME with Baldoni in the basement. And I think that it's very likely if that person is still at WME that that person probably is, giving up a lot of secrets of like what were they talking about behind the scenes? Like you talk about everything with your agent. So I want to know, is Justin's old agent still at WME? Because if he or she, that can tell us a lot about
yeah,
what does WME know,
there's so much money laundering that can happen. So if you're Justin's agent and you want to stick by him, WME can say you're not going to stick by him, and then you say, "Well, but I'm going to lose my livelihood. I was getting 10%," and they go, "We're going to set you up with these other clients who have these projects coming. You'll get 10% of that." Like
But I
there's
want, yeah, but we want to know who was he talking to? What is going like you
protect the brand. The corporations are psychopathic, and the agency is going to protect itself, and it's higher earning clients.
Well,
It's
yes, and the fact that that there's a partner at WME, so that's the highest you can get at a company, a partner at WME who's married to another person suing Baldoni. So you don't think that the WME agent that was repping Baldoni it had to give up everything he knows if he wants to keep his job?
It's fascinating, and I think we're still on the tip of the iceberg. I think there's a lot
Yeah,
more to come out. So you'll have to come back because we're out of time. You'll have to come back
yeah.
and keep on doing your thing. It's been really great getting to know folks like yourself who have
Thank
your own
you.
case study. I wish you had $100 million backer
I
for your
know.
lawsuits, but
Yes, and, well, I'll plug my book, that's why, this whole thing has kind of sparked so much interest in this, I'm writing a book called Cracking the Fame Algorithm, it's the dark side of influence, and the book isn't just about what happened to me, but it's basically exposing the ugly truths behind fame, the media, and the influencer economy, so if you wanna help bring those stories to light, you can go to my website. It's littlemissjacob.com. Or if like Steve Sarowitz, like if they're all about cancel culture now and they want to tell my story, hey.
there it is.
I'm
Look, we'll post a
well,
link to it below,
yeah.
but that sounds like it's going to be juicy as hell.
Yeah. Like it's so nice to just not have that like toxic anger anymore. Now I'm just like, oh yeah, it was a crazy story about what happened and I survived and here I am.
You're only
So,
stronger, but you really must have gone through
yeah.
hell and back. I can't imagine. Well, thanks again for coming by, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.